Tanya Van Cuylenborg was born on March 7, 1969, in Victoria, Canada. She grew up in a loving home with her parents and an older brother to whom she was very close. From childhood, Tanya had a deep love for animals and even dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. She also longed to travel and see the world. During high school, she went on a trip to Paris with her best friend, which only fueled her passion for traveling. At 18, just before graduating, she met Jay Cook, a boy 2 years older who had attended the same school. They were introduced through a mutual friend after Jay had already graduated, and soon they began dating. Although Tanya had her sights set on becoming a veterinarian, she decided to postpone college to save money for travel. After finishing high school, she worked at a cafe and also earned money as a dog walker. Jay, on the other hand, didn't pursue college either. He went straight to helping his father with the family's small heating installation business. In November 1987, Jay's father received an order for a heating part that couldn't be found at local suppliers. The closest place to get it was in Seattle, Washington. With too much work on his hands, Jay's father asked him to make the trip instead. Jay agreed, eager not only to help his father but also because it gave him an opportunity to spend time with Tanya. At that point, the couple had been together for about 6 months, and Jay hoped the trip would bring them closer. Tanya immediately agreed to join him. The plan was to leave Victoria in the morning, reach Seattle by evening, and return the following day. Jay's father gave him his van, money for a hotel, $700 for the part, and some additional cash for expenses. To save money, Jay and Tanya decided they would sleep in the van rather than a hotel. Although Seattle was not far from Victoria, the journey required taking 2 ferries, one to enter the U.S. and another to cross the bay near Seattle. On November 18th, they boarded the van and headed for the first ferry to Port Angeles. Their parents expected them back the following afternoon. But when Tanya and Jay never returned, worry quickly set in. Knowing the ferry schedule, their families realized the couple should have been home already. At first, they thought perhaps Tanya and Jay had stopped to enjoy the scenery and missed the ferry, but as more time passed with no word, concern deepened. By the next afternoon, Tanya's parents contacted Jay's, and both families began to fear something serious had happened. Even so, they clung to hope that the couple had simply extended their trip. When Tanya and Jay still hadn't returned the following day, their parents went to the police to file a missing persons report. The authorities, however, were hesitant to act. Since Tanya was 18 and Jay 20, and with no evidence of foul play, police believed they might just be off on an adventure. The families strongly disagreed. Jay was responsible, committed to helping his father's business, and would never disappear without contacting home. Payphones were plentiful along their route, and if they had chosen to extend the trip, they surely would have called. Unconvinced by the police, Tanya's father decided to take matters into his own hands. First, the families learned that Tanya and Jay had never picked up the part in Seattle, despite the supplier waiting for them for hours. Tanya's father then drove the route himself but found no trace of them or the van. Determined, he even hired a helicopter to search the area from above, though the dense forests made spotting anything nearly impossible. Afterward, he printed flyers with information about their disappearance and went to Seattle to post them across the city. For several days, the families continued their desperate search while the police remained slow to act, still believing the young couple would eventually return. The only step they took was notifying their Seattle counterparts, providing descriptions of Tanya, Jay, and the van in case they were spotted. Then, on November 24th, 5 days after the disappearance, a man walking in the woods near a small town 90 miles north of Seattle came across something unusual beneath a tree. Looking closer, he realized it was a human body and immediately called police. Officers arrived and found the body of a young woman. Her clothes were partially missing, her hands were bound, and she had been shot in the head. Investigators concluded she had been killed elsewhere, since there was little blood at the scene. With no ID, police checked reports of missing women and quickly matched the description to Tanya Van Cuylenborg. Her father was called to the morgue, where he confirmed the victim was his daughter. Investigators now turned to reconstructing what had happened, They learned Tanya had been traveling with Jay, who was still missing along with the van. Some suspected Jay's involvement, but his family strongly denied this, insisting he was non-violent, loved Tanya, and had no access to firearms. While police searched for him, another lead emerged. In Bellingham, about 18 miles from where Tanya's body had been found, a bartender discovered a wallet and keys outside. Inside the wallet was Tanya's ID. At first, the bartender kept the items, expecting the owner might return, but after seeing a news report about Tanya's murder, he contacted police. Detectives searched the area near the bar and discovered zip ties similar to those used to bind Tanya, rubber gloves, and a half-empty box of bullets. Then they spotted a van parked nearby. It turned out to be the same one Tanya and Jay had used for their trip. The inside was a mess, but investigators recovered several important pieces of evidence, including receipts that mapped out the couple's route and a ferry ticket. This confirmed that Tanya and Jay had indeed reached Seattle, where something terrible occurred. Detectives also noticed that Tanya's camera was missing from the van, suggesting the killer might have taken it. The van's interior was stained with blood, which forensic experts collected and sent for analysis. At the time, DNA testing was still new but had already proven effective in solving some cases. The Seattle lab identified 3 blood samples, Tanya's, Jay's, and one from an unknown man. Since no FBI DNA database existed yet, there was no way to match the third sample without a direct comparison. Still, this evidence cleared Jay as a suspect, leaving investigators to wonder if he was alive and where he might be. That question was answered on November 26th, when a group of hunters discovered a body near a bridge outside Seattle. It was Jay Cook. His body showed multiple bruises, and he had been strangled to death. The brutality of the crime led detectives to consider whether the killer might have known him personally. They also theorized that Jay was killed first, his body left near Seattle, before the killer drove Tanya almost to the Canadian border, murdered her, and abandoned her body in the woods. Forensic examination also revealed semen on Tanya's body, matching the unknown man's DNA from the van. Even so, his identity remained a mystery. Investigators pieced together the couple's movements using receipts found in the van. After arriving in Port Angeles by ferry, they bought food at a store before heading towards Seattle. Evidence showed Jay missed the shortest route, supported by a store receipt from Hoodsport and testimony from a clerk who recalled giving them directions to the ferry. The clerk also remembered seeing a man in a brown raincoat who appeared to follow them, entering the store right after they did and leaving soon after. Another receipt showed they stopped in Allen, and later they purchased a ferry ticket near Seattle, where multiple witnesses confirmed seeing them. Beyond that, their movements went cold. Detectives checked the records of violent offenders in the Seattle area, but no leads emerged. Despite having the killer's DNA, they had no way to identify him. Investigators believed the crime was too organized to be a first offense, suggesting the perpetrator was experienced and may have stalked the couple before abducting them in Seattle. Detectives theorized the killer may have gained the couple's trust by asking for a ride and later used a gun to take control. They also suspected he intentionally left Tanya's belongings, gloves, and other items in plain sight as a way to mock the police, hinting that fingerprints would be useless since he wore gloves. Although several fingerprints were recovered from the van that didn't belong to Tanya or Jay, investigators doubted they came from the killer. None matched any existing records, so they provided no new leads. For weeks, police interviewed suspects and pursued tips, but nothing panned out. Then, about a month after the murders in December, something unexpected occurred. Tanya and Jay's families began receiving disturbing letters and postcards from someone claiming to be the killer. The writer confessed to the murders, taunted the grieving families, and declared the police would never catch him. Authorities tried to trace the source of the letters but could only determine the cities they had been mailed from, which was no help in identifying the sender. The letters continued arriving, often on holidays, seemingly to inflict maximum pain. Since they came from different cities and states, investigators believed the sender was traveling. Still, they couldn't be certain the writer was truly the killer, as high-profile cases often attract hoaxes from people pretending to be the perpetrator. With no solid leads, the case stagnated for years. Detectives pursued different suspects and considered the possibility that a serial killer was responsible. Their theory gained weight since 2 other couples had been abducted in the same region around that time, though no concrete connection could be established. Over the following years, police arrested several serial killers in the area, but none were linked to Tanya and Jay's murders. In 2003, the case was reopened, and the perpetrator's DNA was finally entered into the FBI database, but no matches were found. Investigators continued to believe the killer likely had a long history of crime, but either avoided arrest or had been caught before DNA profiling became mandatory. Then, in 2010, a new development occurred. This case was later featured on a popular national TV show, which brought in a wave of new tips. One caller claimed to know who had been sending letters to Tanya and Jay's families. The lead pointed to a 78-year-old man from Seattle, and detectives began investigating him. They discovered that he had traveled across the country during the years the letters were mailed, and his travel records lined up with the postmarks. Police determined he was the author of the letters but had no connection to the murders themselves. He was suffering from severe mental illness, and his DNA did not match the blood or semen from the crime scenes. This confirmed that the letters were nothing more than cruel hoaxes written by someone completely unrelated to the case. The investigation went cold again for years. In 2018, detectives turned to Paraban, a company specializing in creating composite sketches using DNA. With no other leads, they decided to try this method. Paraban generated images showing what the suspect might have looked like at various ages, and police shared these with the media. Unfortunately, the sketches led nowhere. Refusing to give up, investigators tried another approach: genetic genealogy. Paraban uploaded the killer's DNA into public genealogy databases to search for relatives. They soon identified a possible second cousin, and by building out her family tree, investigators narrowed down their suspect. They were looking for a man who lived in or near Seattle in 1987 and matched the profile. With the cousin's help, they identified 55-year-old William Talbot, a truck driver from a Seattle suburb. To confirm, police placed him under surveillance and retrieved a discarded coffee cup. The saliva provided a DNA profile, which was an exact match. In May 2018, more than 30 years after the murders, William was arrested. He denied any involvement, and the case proceeded to trial. The trial began in 2019. William's defense attorneys argued that the DNA evidence was not conclusive, suggesting the semen on Tanya's body could have been from consensual sex. They also pointed out the lack of direct evidence tying him to Jay's murder. But the prosecution had strong rebuttals. Back in 1987, fingerprints were recovered from the van that did not belong to Tanya or Jay. When re-examined, they were found to match William's prints. A friend of his also testified that he had seen a brown van outside William's home in 1987, though William did not own one. This indicated that he may have driven Jay's van there, even if the exact timing was unclear. William also lived just a few miles from where Jay's body was discovered, showing familiarity with the area. Relatives painted a grim picture of William's character. Many described him as extremely aggressive, and several had cut ties with him long before. When they learned of his arrest, they admitted they were not surprised he was accused of murder. The prosecution argued that William had likely asked Tanya and Jay for a ride under false pretenses. Once in Seattle, he used a gun to force them into a remote area, killed them at separate locations, abandoned Tanya's belongings in the van, and managed to avoid capture for decades. Without a confession, investigators could not fill in every detail, but the DNA, fingerprints, and testimony left little doubt about his guilt. In June 2019, William was convicted of both murders and sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. This became the first conviction achieved through genetic genealogy. However, complications arose afterward. William's lawyers appealed, claiming the jury had been biased and therefore unfit to serve, violating his constitutional rights. In 2021, a judge overturned the conviction and ordered a retrial. But in 2022, a higher court reversed that ruling, reinstating his original conviction. As for Williams' involvement in other crimes, nothing definitive has been established. While he had prior convictions for lesser offenses, he had never faced murder charges before. Still, investigators suspect he may be linked to other unsolved cases. The calculated nature of Tanya and Jay's murders and his ability to evade justice for decades suggested that this was not his first time killing. Whether or not he committed other murders may never be known. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned and brace yourself for what's coming next.